Maplewood was the kind of town where the air smelled of pine and the streets carried echoes of generations. Folks waved at each other from porches. The diner served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and secrets hid behind curtains like shadows waiting for the right moment to slip free. This story begins with Sarah Whitmore, a woman whose laughter once filled the town square, whose dreams stretched far beyond the borders of Maplewood. She believed in love, in family, in the promise that those closest to you would never turn against you. But Maplewood had a way of testing faith, and Sarah was about to learn that betrayal often comes from the hands you trust the most. Sarah was 27, sharp-minded, with a heart that carried both fire and tenderness. She had returned home after years of chasing opportunities in the city, carrying with her the hope of building something new. Her heart belonged to James, a man with a quiet strength, whose smile could soften even the hardest day. James wasn't just her lover, he was her confidant, her anchor. Their love grew in stolen moments, walks by the river, whispered promises under the stars, letters tucked into books. Sarah believed James was her future, but her family had other plans. Her father, Charles Whitmore, was a man of reputation, respected in town for his lumber business. He was stern, proud, and unyielding. Her mother, Helen, carried secrets in her eyes, secrets she never spoke of. And then there was her brother, David. David had always been protective of Sarah, but lately his gaze carried something darker, something restless. He had ambitions that stretched beyond Maplewood, ambitions that made him dangerous. The Whitmore estate sat at the edge of town, a sprawling house with white columns and a porch that seemed to watch over Maplewood like a sentinel. Inside, the air was heavy with tradition. Charles demanded loyalty, Helen offered quiet comfort, and David sought power. Sarah often felt caught between them, her heart torn between love and duty. She wanted to believe her family would accept James, but whispers told her otherwise. One evening, as autumn leaves painted the ground in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah overheard her father and David in the study. The door was ajar, the voices low but sharp. James's name was spoken, followed by words that chilled her: debt, betrayal, danger. She pressed her ear to the wood, her heart pounding. Charles accused James of stealing from the company, of falsifying records. David agreed, his tone cold, calculated. Sarah's breath caught. Could it be true? The man she loved, accused of betraying her family? She fled before they could see her, confusion tearing at her chest. That night, she confronted James. His silence was heavy, his eyes filled with sorrow. He confessed, not to theft, but to desperation. Years ago, before Maplewood, his family's farm had collapsed under debt. He had borrowed money, made mistakes, and Charles had discovered it. Charles now held it over him, demanding he leave Sarah or face ruin. James swore he had never touched Whitmore Lumber's accounts, never betrayed her trust. Sarah believed him, but doubt lingered like smoke. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew. David avoided her, his words clipped, his smile gone. Helen watched from the sidelines, her eyes filled with a sadness Sarah couldn't decipher. The town whispered, rumors spread, and Sarah felt trapped between love and loyalty. She tried to speak to her father, but Charles dismissed her, his pride unyielding. "Family comes first," he said. "And James is not family, but betrayal runs deeper than words." Sarah discovered that David had struck a deal with Charles, In exchange for exposing James's past, David would inherit the company, stepping into the role Charles had promised him. It wasn't just about protecting the family, it was about power, about control. David had chosen ambition over blood, and Sarah's heart shattered. She confronted him in the old barn where they once played as children. "How could you?" she cried. David's face was stone. "I'm doing what's best for us," he said. "You'll see one day." But Sarah saw only betrayal. The breaking point came during the town's winter gala, a night of music and laughter where lanterns lit the streets and snow fell like confetti. Sarah stood with James, her hand in his, when Charles announced David as the future of Whitmore Lumber. The crowd cheered, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise. She demanded the truth, her words echoing in the hall. Charles faltered, Helen wept, and David's silence betrayed him. James stood beside her, his grip firm, his love unwavering. The town watched as the Whitmore family unraveled, secrets spilling like shattered glass. In the aftermath, Sarah made her choice. She walked away from the wealth, the legacy, the control. With James, she built a new life, one not bound by betrayal but by trust. They left Maplewood carrying only what mattered, their love, their courage, their hope. The town whispered of scandal for years, but Sarah's story became a reminder. Love can survive betrayal, but only if you're brave enough to fight for it. And yet, the shadows of Maplewood lingered. David rose to power, but his ambition consumed him. Charles's pride crumbled, Helen's silence grew heavier, and the Whitmore name became a cautionary tale. Sarah and James, far from the town, found peace and simplicity and honesty in the kind of love that endures storms. Their story was not perfect, but it was theirs. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn whispers into light. The trial had ended, but the echoes of it lingered in Maplewood like smoke after a fire. James was acquitted, his name cleared. Yet the damage was done. The Whitmore family stood fractured, its reputation in tatters, and the town's whispers grew louder with each passing day. Sarah walked through the streets with her head held high, but inside her heart trembled. She had defended the man she loved, exposed her brother's schemes, and challenged her father's authority. But victory had come at a cost, and she knew the scars would never fade. Charles withdrew into himself. Once a man of booming voice and commanding presence, he now spent his days in the study, staring at old ledgers and photographs. His pride had been wounded, his authority undermined. He rarely spoke to Sarah, and when he did, his words were sharp, laced with bitterness. "You've destroyed this family," he told her one evening, his eyes cold, "all for a man who will never be one of us." Sarah's voice shook, but she stood firm. "I didn't destroy us, Father. You did, when you chose control over compassion." He turned away, unwilling to hear. Helen, her mother, carried guilt like a heavy cloak. She had spoken the truth in court, exposing David's betrayal, but the act had broken her. She spent long hours in silence, her hands trembling, her eyes distant. Sarah tried to comfort her, but Helen seemed lost in memories, haunted by choices she had made long ago. "I should have spoken sooner," she whispered one night. "Maybe then none of this would have happened." Sarah held her hand, tears in her eyes. "You saved us, Mother. You saved James." But Helen only shook her head, her sorrow too deep. David vanished after the trial. Some said he left town, others claimed he lingered in the shadows, plotting his return. Sarah didn't know, and perhaps she didn't want to. The brother she had once adored was gone, replaced by ambition and betrayal. She mourned him as though he were dead. even though she knew he lived. The loss cut deeper than she expected, a wound that would never fully heal. James, though free, struggled to rebuild. His reputation had been tarnished, his opportunities stripped away. He worked odd jobs, repairing fences, hauling timber, anything to earn a living. Sarah stood by him, proud of his resilience, but she saw the weariness in his eyes. He had fought so hard to prove his innocence, yet the town still looked at him with suspicion. "They'll never forget," he said one night, staring at the river. "No matter what I do, I'll always be the man who stood trial." Sarah pressed her hand to his cheek. "Then let's leave. Let's build a life somewhere new." He hesitated, torn between love and pride. "This is your home," he said softly. "I don't want to take you away from it." But Sarah's voice was firm. "Home is where you are." The decision to leave Maplewood was not easy. Sarah loved the town, the pine-lined streets, the familiar faces, the memories of childhood. But she knew she could never truly belong again. The Whitmore name was stained, and her love for James had made her an outcast. So they packed their belongings, said goodbye to Helen, and drove away. Charles did not come to see them off. He remained in the study, his pride too strong, his heart too closed. Their journey beyond Maplewood was filled with uncertainty. They traveled through towns and cities, searching for a place to call home.